What's up, gamers? And you want to know how to build Jiaoqiu before he comes out, because you might be pulling him for your ACHERON team, or you might be pulling him for your DOT team. Hell, you might even be pulling him for a Dr. Ratio team, maybe a Yunli team. Whatever team you might be pulling him for, you're going to want to know how to build him, and that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. And while I think Jiaoqiu is a cool name, I think we should call him Big Jiao, okay? We're going to name him Big Jiao from now on. That's what I'll be referring to him as for the rest of the video. Big J is here, gamers, okay? So I want to start by getting a kit breakdown first, talking to you about how he actually works. This will also show relations with what teams he kind of works with. Then we'll hop into his best light cones, best relics, best teams that he works with, and do I think you should be pulling on him. But I will be having a full do not summon video out on him in the near future, so make sure your eyes are peeled for that, or maybe just hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss out on Hog Champion content like this. Yay! So let's go ahead and first start off with his basic attack and skill first. Both of these do play out the talent, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but the main thing you need to know about these two is the basic attack hits one enemy, fuel attack will be hitting one enemy and then adjacent enemies, and it also has a chance to put an Ash and Roast debuff on the enemy as well, so that's going to be really huge. We'll talk about what Ash and Roast does in a second here, but the basic attack can do the same because it's all going to be playing off the talent, guys, because what the talent's going to be doing is when Big J hits any of his attacks, he's going to be having a 100% base chance to inflict Ash and Roast, and what Ash and Roast is going to be doing, guys, is increasing the damage received by an enemy by 15%, and this Ash and Roast can be stacked up to 5 times, although the first stack will be increasing the damage received by 15%, and then every stack after that will be increasing the damage received by 5%. So you're increasing the damage received by the enemy by 35% at max stacks, and on top of this, guys, it will be giving a fire dot to the enemy, which makes him viable in teams like a dot team. And that talent is going to make it super strong for ACHERON teams as well. Guys, vulnerability is absolutely amazing. The reason why it's so good, though, is because we really don't see many of these buffs in the game. He is like one of the only ones that can do it in the game. Well, to someone else that's able to provide vulnerability to enemies as well, but with Big J here, Big J Dog here, he is able to provide it at a much higher level, which makes him much more viable on a team than Welt is in these teams. And this will also make Jaya really good for Dr. Ratio teams as well, especially if you didn't pull a Topaz and maybe you don't have a Robin as well. I think he slots in there as a sub unit very nice. But like I said before, his talent does play into his ultimate move as well, so let's go ahead and say what the ultimate move does, because this is going to be setting the number of Ash and Roast stacks on enemy target to the highest number of Ash and Roast. And basically what this means, guys, is say you have an enemy on the field that has max stacks, like 5 stacks of Ash and Roast on them, right? You hit this ultimate move, everyone has 5 stacks of Ash and Roast now, and on top of this, the energy cost for this ultimate is 100, which makes it one of the lowest energy costs in the game. Oh my god! It is actually so good, guys. This is very easy to get back up, and if you are playing him correctly, which we'll talk about later in the video, if you're building him correctly, this will just supercharge ACHERON's ult to no end. She will be ulting probably every turn to half a turn with him on the field. Maybe a little over exaggeration there, but you'll get the point when we get there, okay? But not only does it do this, guys, it's going to be activating a zone as well, and when inside that zone, enemies will be receiving 15% increased ultimate damage with a 60% base chance of being inflicted with 1 stack of Ash and Roast when taking action. While the zone exists, the trigger can trigger up to 6 times, and for each enemy target, it can only trigger once per turn. This trigger count resets every time he uses his ultimate move, and it will be lasting for 3 turns. And now, this is where it kind of gets into supercharging ACHERON's ult, and why you want this up at all times. Guys, this is 6 free debuffs that you can practically put on the enemy. So that means every single time you take an action, this enemy has a 60% chance at base of receiving a debuff, which just gives ACHERON a free stack. So practically, this gives her a 66% ultimate charge just by having this field up, and you can practically have this up 100% of the time, unless you speed run through the buffs. Obviously, then you won't be getting any more other than the 6, but you can practically have this up all the time because he will be generating SP. You really don't need to use his skill that often because this does distribute those Ash and Roast stacks out, so you're really only using the skill to get the ultimate back up to make sure that he has it every 3 turns. Also, I will mention his technique because his technique is a field type technique, so if you're using someone like a Welt, for example, right, or a Dr. Ratio that puts like a field out on the ground, his will counteract that, so you can only have one of those out at the same time. Now, before we hop off the kit breakdown, I want to quickly go over his major traces. His A2 trace, pretty fine dandy. That's going to be really good for getting a really quick first ultimate move out, but A4 and A6 are even bigger. Starting off with A4 first, guys, for every 15% of his effect hit rate that exceeds 80%, additionally increases attack by 60% up to 240%. This makes him kind of like a sub DPS. Now, you don't have to run like a sub DPS, but this does give you the opportunity to run him like a sub DPS if you are wanting to do that. And then A6 is also going to be super good as well, because whenever new enemies enter the battlefield with this activated, or with this field activated, they'll also be getting Ash and Roast equivalent to whatever the highest stack of Ash and Roast is. So if you have an enemy with 6, they come into the field, they automatically get 6. 6, so you don't have to build up Asher and Roast on them or use an ult on them because they're coming into the field and automatically getting it. So you're practically having this debuff up at all times. So let's go ahead and start with the best in slot light cone. Obviously, guys, his signature light cone going to be his best in slot light cone. Now, this is not the only option you can use on him. You can also use light cones like solitary healing. It'll be increasing his break effect. Not only that, guys, whenever using his ultimate move, he'll be able to increase the dot he's able to do by 48% as well, which is going to be super massive if you're using him on a dot team. This is a light cone that you could realistically use if you're using him on a dot team. This is going to be his best in slot light cone to use for that. As far as 4-star options go, you can use Eyes of Prey because he works kind of the same way as Black Swan works. You want to be giving him as much effect hit rate as possible, so you're able to first of all maximize on every single debuff you're hitting on the enemy. On top of that, you're able to give him some extra attack bonus with this as well, and then this will be increasing his dot damage, which will then make him even better for dot teams in general. But really, the extra effect right here is the main big thing because you can more so guarantee getting the debuffs off on the enemy, so it will help ACHERON teams out as well, and on top of that, Dr. Ratio teams. You can also use a light cone like Resolute Shines of Pearls of Sweat just because of the fact this does give you the ability to put a defense shred on the enemy as well. So not only are you getting fire dot, not only are you getting vulnerability, but you're also getting defense shred as well. So if you're running this on a Dr. Ratio team, obviously this won't stack if you have more than 2 Resolutes on the team, but if this is the only person on the team with Resolute, you can practically have 3 debuffs off with him. This does help some with an ACHERON team, but if you're running an ACHERON team with a payload, this won't help as much because you probably are using this light cone on her. But maybe if you're using this on a Dr. Ratio team, this does enable you to get an extra debuff off with him. So you'll have 3 debuffs up at all time on an enemy with this light cone, which means you practically have a 100% uptime on Dr. Ratio's damage bonus. So this could be really good for a team like that as well. And that's really all the light cones that I want to talk about now. If you have before the tutorial mission light cone starts, light cone, you can use that on him. That only really works if you have a payload on the team or someone that has some type of defense shredding capabilities because he doesn't have any of it, but you can use him on a team combined with them, maybe with an ACHERON team, to really maximize the amount of energy he's getting back so you can spam his ultimate even more, which means ACHERON gets her ultimate up even more. Just more efficiency for ACHERON's ultimate at the end of the day with that light cone. And now the moment you've been waiting for. What are Big J's best relic sets? And if you don't like me calling him Big J, then make sure you hit that subscribe button because, yeah, I don't know why you would subscribe if you don't like something I'm doing. But hey, hit that subscribe button anyways because cringe, kooky, wacky, stuff like that. Hit the subscribe button for Big J, guys, please. He needs help. No one's gonna summon on him. And he needs all the support he can get. Anyways, guys, let's get back to these relics. Let's go ahead and talk about his best in slot relics now because I'm gonna keep it a buck with you guys. He really doesn't have like a best in slot relic set in the game right now. Wink, wink. So you can practically run anything you want on him. Probably the best set to run on him that gives like a universal like buff or whatever would probably be a 2-piece hacker space just because it's going to be giving him increased speed. He already has some speed with his like traces and stuff like that, so this will give him additional speed to become a little bit faster, help him out, get more debuffs on the enemy. The faster he is, the more debuffs he can put on the enemy, which that means your ACHERON would have more uptime as well. Now for other teams it might be more beneficial to run him slower, but overall I think the teams for that particular build of him is pretty niche. So I do think running a 2-piece hacker space is really beneficial for him. Realistically, outside of that, you can run anything. You could run the 2-piece dot set here. You could run the 2-piece pioneer set here, the diver set. You could run either of these sets here. One gives you increased damage for having debuff on the enemy, which he'll always have, and then the other one can be used for dot teams as well. You could actually run a 4-piece dot set on him if you're running him on a dot team, maximize his damage output there because everyone's putting dots on the enemy, so it gives him defense shred. It'll be a great increase for his damage if you're running that on that particular team. I think the overall build for him here should be a 2-piece hacker space and then a 2-piece deep confinement, though you don't really have to run any set at all. You could probably just focus on substats and run a full rainbow set. I have always said this, that I prefer stats over sets. Some sets will give you a big advantage by having the set, but most sets in the game, especially if they aren't like super akin to that character, it's better to just find the best stats that you possibly have on your account. So focus on getting those main stats and substats instead of focusing on the sets per se. So you really don't have to do any farming for gear for them. You can really go to farm for any of your DPS, and then whatever pieces you get or off pieces you get for that, you can kind of take the pieces that you were going to dumpster and you can just kind of throw all those pieces on him. Now let's go ahead and talk about the best in slot planar sets because this is where it gets a little bit more interesting at. So the best in slot planar set is going to be Pangalactic here, guys. I know it's a different name now, but Pangalactic is going to be his best in slot. Why? Because it gives him effect hit rate, everything of his kit scales off of effect hit rate, so you want as much effect hit rate as possible. This set is absolute dog shit to farm, so I don't expect you to go through and actually farm this set. You could use some of your trash 5-star materials to just go and make these or build these up inside of like your synthesizer or whatever. You could do that if you wanted to, but not completely necessary. Another thing you could do here, guys, is you could run Von Quack or Penacony here as well. Why? Both give you energy regen. He is going to be wanting as much energy regen as possible. More energy regen that he can get means the more ults that he can pop off. And then also, if you're running with ACHERON, you give her more damage too, because the more times she ults, the more damage you get out. Pinacone kind of works well. I mean, if you're running him on a team with like fire DPS, like maybe if you're running him on a team with, say, Dr. Ratio, Topaz, you didn't have Robin or like another strong buffer for whatever reason, throw him on the team, then he'll be buffing up your Topaz's damage, and then also providing extra debuffs for the team as well. So that could be a very viable option there too. Now let's go ahead and talk about those main and substats you're going to be wanting for him. So gamers, on the boots, you're going to be wanting to run speed here. You want to be as fast as possible. On the body piece, you're going to be wanting to run effect hit rate. That's the non-negotiable. You definitely want effect hit rate on the body. On the rope, ERR. And then finally on the sphere, I would recommend probably HP defense. If you're running them like a DPS, then obviously you would change this to a fire damage, but I'm probably just going to run mine, not really worrying about the damage too much. So I'm just going to be focusing on getting as much HP and defense as absolutely possible to make sure that he can survive. And then transitioning over to those substats, guys, you're really just going to want to focus on getting effect hit rate, HP defense, and then also speed as well. These are like the main core things you're going to want to focus on. This will allow him to survive. Obviously, if you're running him more DPS oriented, then obviously you would run more damage oriented stats, but that's completely up to you. I'm running mine like this. That's the way I'm going to recommend it to you guys. Now let's go ahead and talk about the best in slot teams for Big J. So I just want to get this out of the gate. You should know already. His best in slot team is an ACHERON team. He is literally built for ACHERON team. Best in slot for an ACHERON team. Absolutely recommend him there. Not really going to go too much in detail on that. A lot of other content creators already talked about it. So let's go on to the next team, which is DOT. Obviously, he does offer dot with his move. On top of this, he offers damage vulnerability buffs as well, which means the other dots on him or on the enemy will deal more damage. So he works really well on dot teams as well. He does give fire dot, like I mentioned before. So this can also be a very good team to run him on. But let's talk about other teams. What does he do? What is his main shtick, right? Putting debuffs on enemies. So that means him on a Dr. Ratio team can also work very well too. Is he the best in slot for a Dr. Ratio team? No way in hell. But if you have Dr. Ratio in your account, maybe you have a Topaz in your account, maybe you missed a Robin for whatever reason. If you don't have the best follow-up team, he is a good second best in slot just to slot in with the team and just kind of work well with the team. Even if you don't have Topaz, you could use him and Dr. Ratio on the same team. It also works very fine there. Same thing can be said with Yinli as well. If you don't have like her best in slot options, he is a good second best option to put into the team. So he does work for a plethora of teams. You can realistically use him for any DPS oriented team if you don't have their best teams. That's honestly one of the main pros and cons of them. While he can be fit in with a lot of teams, right? He's a jack of all trades in the sense of he can fit in a lot of places. His debuffs are beneficial for you, but if we're talking about defense percentage, that's just better. So if you're using Pale on a team, you can maybe run him and Pale on the same team, but overall Pale is usually going to be the better option for the team in terms of pure damage output. But on the good side of it, he can be slotted into a lot of teams. Say you didn't have a Pale built up, say you didn't have the best 5-star options for the team, like for example the Dr. Ratio team. Say you just had Dr. Ratio, maybe you played, you got your free Dr. Ratio, you're just now coming back to the game, you get him on your account, he works really well there. He can work really well for just about any DPS oriented team if you don't have their best synergy. He is a good second to third best in slot in a lot of different scenarios, so you can kind of throw him wherever you want if you don't have the full team built out. The only problem is whenever you get that team built out, you'll be replacing him for the better unit and you won't be using him on that team anymore. But I'll talk more about all of the cons of him in the Do Not Summon for Big J video. Anyways, gamers, that's going to do it for today's video. Those are all the teams he can work with. That's his kit breakdown, and those are his best sets and light cones, everything like that. So, subscribe to the video if you haven't already. I love you guys. Maybe. Sorry, that was a little bit weird, a little bit forthcoming, a little bit of, what's it called? Parasocial viewing. Anyways, bye guys. See you later.